Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. On the evening of April 19th, 2002, Greg Allen dropped off his 4-year-old daughter, Sabrina, for a weekend visit with her mother. As he hugged her goodbye, she held onto him tightly and whispered that her stomach hurt, just like it always did when she had to stay with her mom. Greg reassured her, smiled, and promised he'd be back to pick her up soon. But when Sunday arrived, Sabrina never came home. Greg waited. He called. He drove to the address his ex-wife, Dara Lawrence, had given him, only to find out it was fake. Sabrina had vanished. As panic set in, one terrifying thought kept running through his mind. Would he ever see his daughter again? Sabrina Allen was born on May 30th, 1997, in Austin, Texas, the only child of Dara Lawrence and Greg Allen. While details about her early childhood are scarce, it is known that she grew up in a family marked by emotional and legal challenges. Dara had difficulty holding a steady job, often working in sales, but rarely keeping a position for more than 6 months. Greg, an electrical engineer and sonar expert, was deeply involved in research for his doctoral studies at the University of Texas in Austin. Sabrina attended daycare, where her teachers adored her. They described her as an energetic and lively child who loved chasing pigeons. She was outgoing, always eager to talk to people of all ages. During that time, she formed a close friendship with a girl her age, Celeste Chavez. The two were inseparable, spending almost every afternoon and weekend together, much to the delight of their parents, who encouraged their bond. They especially enjoyed dressing up as Disney princesses, and one of Celeste's fondest memories was from Halloween in 2001 when they dressed as Snow White and Belle to go trick-or-treating. However, Sabrina's happy and carefree childhood took a drastic turn when her parents separated. Their divorce marked a major shift in her life. After the split, Dara accused Greg of child abuse, while Sabrina, in an interview with a child protection officer, claimed that her father was violent and had physically harmed her mother. But as the investigation unfolded, inconsistencies in their statements began to surface. When questioned separately, Sabrina broke down in tears and revealed a shocking truth. Her mother had manipulated her into making false accusations. Faced with this revelation, along with other evidence gathered during the investigation, the court ordered a psychological evaluation of Dara. The results indicated that she suffered from a personality disorder. As a result, a judge ruled that Greg would retain full custody of Sabrina, while Dara was granted supervised visitation rights. However, this decision only escalated tensions. Dara frequently threatened to take Sabrina away, and visitation disputes became common. Greg reported these issues to the court, but officials stated they could not intervene beyond the established custody arrangements. By early 2002, something changed. Between March and April, Dara stopped arguing over custody and suddenly seemed more cooperative and content. Greg, relieved by what he believed was a positive shift, lowered his guard. But what he didn't realize was that beneath this apparent calm, Dara was putting together a plan that would have devastating consequences. There were warning signs, but Greg failed to recognize them. One particularly alarming moment occurred when Sabrina told her paternal grandmother that she was going to live with her mother in Mexico. Though surprised, the family dismissed it as a child's misunderstanding. Greg noticed Dara seemed nervous, but he clung to the hope that her newfound friendliness was genuine. Then came April 19th, the weekend of Dara's scheduled visitation. Greg dropped Sabrina off, kissed her goodbye, and reassured her when she anxiously reminded him not to forget to pick her up. According to later reports, Sabrina would often complain of stomach aches whenever she had to stay with her mother. This visit, however, was different. For reasons that remain unclear, there was no supervision as mandated by the court. When the weekend ended and Sabrina was supposed to return home, neither she nor Dara showed up. Greg waited for hours, his worry growing with each passing minute. Finally, he decided to go to the address Dara had provided. But upon arriving, he was met with a chilling realization. The address was fake. Dara had taken Sabrina against court orders. Greg immediately reported the abduction, but he encountered an infuriating obstacle. The local police were slow to act, as cases of missing children in custody disputes were not always prioritized. As a result, law enforcement delayed issuing an official alert. It wasn't until April 29th that a state warrant for Dara's arrest was issued by the Travis County District Court. By May, authorities escalated their efforts, charging her with unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. On May 10th, a federal arrest warrant was also filed against her, suspecting that she had fled the country with Sabrina. By then, investigators believed Dara had successfully escaped the country and had taken her daughter to Mexico, beginning a desperate search that would span years. Between 1999 and 2009, official reports from the Government Accountability Office of Congress estimated that at least 6,000 children were illegally taken to foreign countries by one of their parents, all of whom were U.S. residents. Among them were children taken while one parent was serving in the U.S. military. Unfortunately, only a small percentage of these children were ever able to return to their home country. In most cases, the abductions involved Mexico, and the lack of coordination between authorities made the situation worse. At that time, there was no national database of custody orders issued by U.S. courts to help immigration officials determine the legal status of a child leaving the country. Even if such documents had been available, international airlines typically had less than 30 minutes to cross-check passenger lists against missing child reports or court orders prohibiting travel. After Sabrina Allen's forced disappearance, Greg Allen was devastated. As he described it, he went from being a devoted single father whose life revolved around raising his daughter to feeling like a parent who had been abandoned, his entire purpose in life ripped away. He lost all contact with Sabrina and embarked on an exhaustive, desperate search to find her. While the police began piecing together the case, Greg took matters into his own hands, hiring specialists in search and rescue. Investigators soon discovered that Dara had enlisted the help of an acquaintance from work who drove her and Sabrina to a bus station. There, she purchased a ticket with cash to avoid leaving a trace. The two then boarded a bus, which initially took them to Laredo, a border city in southern Texas. At the time, border regulations did not require parents to present documentation for children crossing with them, making it easy for Dara to take Sabrina into Mexico without leaving any official records. While authorities searched for a missing 5-year-old girl with blonde hair, fair skin, and brown eyes, Dara was already taking steps to ensure they wouldn't be found. She altered Sabrina's appearance frequently, by cutting and changing her hair, making identification nearly impossible. The two lived on the move for years, passing through various unknown locations under different identities. Since Sabrina did not speak Spanish, she could not attend school, leaving no educational records to track. Eventually, she was enrolled in a preschool in Felix Cuevas, where she learned to read and write in Spanish. However, her status as an undocumented immigrant and her mother's refusal to provide any identification prevented her from being formally registered in the Mexican education system. As a result, she spent years without attending school. Despite law enforcement's efforts, Greg continued his own investigation. In 2003, he came agonizingly close to finding his daughter. Just before Father's Day, he received an email from a man claiming to have had contact with a child matching Sabrina's description. The sender was one of Sabrina's teachers who had been deeply moved by an interaction with the little girl. She had cried in his arms, speaking very little Spanish and struggling to communicate with her classmates. Frustrated and isolated, she sought comfort in adults rather than other children. When the teacher expressed kindness toward her, Sabrina broke down even further. Through her tears, she admitted that she missed her father. The teacher was shocked. Until then, he had believed Sabrina and her mother were alone. As their conversation continued, the girl slowly opened up despite her lingering fear. She revealed that she and her mother were living under false identities. Dara was now Blanca, while Sabrina had been given the name Adriana. How Dara obtained these false identities remained a mystery. Through trembling words, Sabrina confessed that she did have a father named Greg, who lived in Texas. She shared her real name and, with desperation in her eyes, pleaded for help in finding him. She even mentioned that her dad had a picture of her online. After verifying her story, the unnamed teacher contacted Greg, expressing his belief that Sabrina was suffering under her mother's care. The information left Greg overwhelmed with a mixture of hope and anxiety. His daughter was in a school just 30 minutes away from where he was at that moment. Yet, despite the urgency of the situation, he knew he couldn't act alone. Legal procedures had to be followed, so he immediately alerted the police and the U.S. Embassy. However, the long-awaited rescue operation ended in devastating failure. By the time authorities arrived, Dara had already vanished with Sabrina. In an almost surreal display of speed and precision, she managed to escape, once again disappearing without a trace, leaving Greg heartbroken and back at square one. Time, bureaucracy, and endless paperwork worked against Greg, allowing Dara to evade authorities once again. Desperate to find his daughter, Greg traveled to Mexico multiple times and even began learning Spanish in hopes of conducting his own search. The language teacher he hired, a woman named Mariana, was deeply moved by his story. She not only helped him with the language, but also became his ally in the search for Sabrina. Over time, their connection grew into something more, and they eventually started a relationship that led to marriage. Together, they built a new family, welcoming 2 daughters and a son. However, Greg never gave up on his mission to find Sabrina, and Mariana fully supported him in his pursuit. Meanwhile, Sabrina was growing up in an unstable and isolated world. Without any real emotional support or sense of belonging, she had no friends and did not attend school. Dara, still on the run, never stayed in one place for too long, preventing her daughter from forming any connections outside their secretive life. In an effort to keep Sabrina from being recognized, Dara frequently dyed her daughter's hair, eyelashes, and eyebrows in shades of brown or red. The constant use of chemicals took a toll on Sabrina's scalp, leading to noticeable hair loss and even patches of baldness. According to reports, Dara remained hidden for years, successfully throwing Greg and the authorities off her trail. To ensure she wouldn't be recognized, she underwent multiple plastic surgeries, altering her appearance significantly. As time passed, Greg refused to give up, continuing to invest in the search. He hired a private investigator, Phil Klein, whose team followed hundreds of leads. Yet, despite their relentless efforts, every clue led to a dead end. 12 years later, when hope seemed all but lost, an unexpected breakthrough changed everything. An informant working with Klein's investigative team came forward with a crucial lead, one that suggested Sabrina was closer than they had ever imagined. Within a week, the team identified an address linked to Dara in the small town of Papalotla, southeast of Mexico City. By then, Sabrina was 17 years old, living with her mother in a modest two-bedroom apartment. Both were using false identities to remain undetected. Investigators kept the location under strict surveillance, carefully gathering evidence before taking action. Eventually, they secured the cooperation of the FBI, the Mexican Federal Police, and the U.S. Marshals Service. After 2 weeks of monitoring the residence, law enforcement was certain they had found them. On the night of September 30th, 2016, at approximately 11:32 p.m., authorities launched a surprise raid. Dara reacted with unexpected violence, resisting arrest in a chaotic confrontation that resulted in an officer being injured. The situation quickly escalated, but after several tense moments, officers finally secured Sabrina's rescue. Dara was immediately arrested and extradited to Texas, where she faced charges of aggravated kidnapping. Meanwhile, Sabrina was flown to Austin, where a medical team awaited her arrival. The years of captivity had taken a significant toll, physically, mentally, and emotionally. For Greg, it was a moment of overwhelming and conflicting emotions. He was overjoyed to have finally found his daughter, yet heartbroken to learn that she was not ready to see him. After so many years in isolation, Sabrina struggled to process her new reality. Though Greg had dreamed of embracing his daughter again, he understood that she needed time. At a press conference, he stated that his first question to Sabrina would not be, "How are you?" but rather, "Can I hug you?" While Greg hoped for her recovery, Sabrina began intensive psychological treatment to process the trauma she had endured since she was 4 years old. Reports indicated that she had not attended school for at least 2 years, leaving her far behind academically for her age. Social interactions were equally difficult, as years of isolation had made it hard for her to adjust to new surroundings. Though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: Sabrina was finally free, and Greg was determined to help her heal, no matter how long it took. Specialists diagnosed Sabrina with parental alienation syndrome, a condition that, according to experts, involved not only psychological manipulation but also deep emotional, intellectual, and spiritual harm. Over the years, her mother had convinced her that her father and his family did not love her and had never tried to find her. Later, Dara took the deception even further, telling Sabrina that Greg had taken his own life and that her grandparents had passed away as well. Sabrina's mental state was fragile, and psychologists in Texas determined that she would need extensive therapy to process the years of resentment and distrust toward her father. Greg faced the daunting task of proving to his daughter that he was not the cruel and abusive man her mother had described. His goal was to rebuild their bond, show her that he had never stopped searching for her, and remind her that she had always been loved. He hoped she would recall at least some of the happy moments they had shared before Dara took her away, and that, with time, they could create new memories together. To aid in her recovery, Celeste Chavez, Sabrina's childhood best friend from daycare, offered to support her. Having once been like sisters, Celeste wanted to remind Sabrina that she had always been cherished and that many people had never given up on her. She hoped to help her reconnect with the life she had lost and find a sense of belonging again. As Sabrina worked to adjust to her new life in the United States, Dara faced legal consequences for her actions. In March 2016, she appeared in court, where the judge reminded her that she was being prosecuted for kidnapping and interference with child custody, charges that carried a potential 10-year prison sentence. Her defense attorneys argued that she had taken her daughter because she believed Greg was harming her. However, the majority of witnesses spoke in favor of Greg, highlighting his unwavering commitment to finding Sabrina. By the time the trial took place, Sabrina had turned 18 and had chosen to go by the name Fair. Fortunately, she had managed to integrate into Greg's new family and was living with him, her stepmother, and her 3 half-siblings. Yet, despite her progress, the years spent under her mother's influence had left lasting scars. One of the specialists who treated Sabrina after her rescue testified in court, explaining that the first step in her recovery was helping her move out of a constant state of high alert, known in psychological terms as hypervigilance. Mariana also took the stand, sharing that Sabrina had made significant progress since moving in with them, and that her relationship with Greg was slowly strengthening. The court also heard from Sabrina's therapist, who confirmed that she suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and often had nightmares about her mother's arrest in Mexico. However, despite these challenges, she was making meaningful strides in her recovery. Perhaps the most shocking testimony came from Dara's own sister, Dolores, who took the stand against her. She revealed disturbing details about Dara's behavior, stating that while in prison, she had sent a letter to their mother containing strands of hair she had pulled from her own head. Additionally, she had written to their mother, pretending to be their deceased father. This unsettling revelation further reinforced the court's view of Dara's psychological instability. Ultimately, Dara was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Shortly after her conviction, she filed an appeal, claiming that her defense attorney had been incompetent and had failed to represent her properly. However, the appeals court rejected her request, ruling that the original sentence would stand. As of January 31, 2025, when this investigation was concluded, no new public information had surfaced regarding Sabrina's life with Greg and his family. Similarly, there were no updates on Dara's current situation following her imprisonment. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.